Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are in the country. We are here today for another one of our project management office hours. My name is Shelley Reed, and I'm going to turn it over to your host, Heidi Benke.
Hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and dive in, but Shelly is going to help me make sure we have people admitted from the waiting room and help keep an eye on the chat because we were just talking about how when you have multiple screens, it gets all divided in weird ways in Zoom. Um, but we are going to jump right in. Welcome to Failure Camp. I am Heidi Benke. I work with Georgia Legal Services Program. I'm the statewide project manager with them, and I have been working with Shelly for now over a year, trying to make sure that we have project management discussions through LSNTAP. And please do feel free to ask questions as we go. We may hold them off until the end, but if I can respond quickly, I will. So let's get started. Come on. It really wants the animation. So what are we going to talk about today? Um, Failure in theory. So what failure is, what it looks like, how to recognize it, the impact of failure, and how to become failure resilient. Um, we have Some of you may have spoken with me before about failure. I'm actually a huge fan of failure, and I think you will be too by the end of this presentation. But do know that, well, let's just go into it. What is failure? It's when a project doesn't deliver one or more of its objectives on time, within budget, or to the required quality. Um, the idea of just having one element of failure in a project is very common. And according to the Project Management Institute, which y'all know I'm a huge fan of, over 70% of projects fail or experience serious difficulties. It is more likely that your project will fail in one or more respects than succeed purely across the board. I've definitely experienced that in my own life. I'm sure you all have seen it too within yours. There is a difference. If you're in a high performing organization, you might actually experience success in projects way more frequently than if you're in a low performing organization. The 92% is a success rate, that's not a failure rate. So keep in mind that once you get into the habit of dealing with failures, they stop being failure. And they stop having the serious difficulties that you may experience otherwise. So, how it thrives. This is where failure tends to come from. Obviously, there are other ways, but I think they come in one of three categories: communication, poor planning, and poor management. Communication is not having clear or realistic expectations set. I don't know how many of you, maybe show of hands on the Zoom screen, have ever been in a project where you're given an assignment and not told enough information about what you're doing. Uh, I've had that happen a lot. Lack of transparency, I think, in organizations, especially where there are strict hierarchies, it can be easy for people to say, well, you don't need that information. Um, I've every time I've experienced that, I've always had the question of, well, how do you know what I need or don't need? Like, I'm the one working on this project. This information could be helpful. And inadequate stakeholder management or stakeholder buy-in. So they may tell you what they need to know, but nobody has done the footwork of making sure the people impacted by or who could impact your project are kept aware, and are supportive of the work that you're doing. Planning, inadequate resources. I think everybody has known what it's like to be told to do something and not given what you need to do it. The unrealistic deadlines, scope creep, being asked to do more toward the end of the project or having the ground shift beneath your feet. Um, that's all that's all part of it. And then poor management. This may be something that you as the project manager or the person in charge of the project sees, or it could be people who are in leadership above you, um, but they don't support the project nearly as much. They don't have means of monitoring the project progress throughout, and controlling it so that it doesn't become a bigger issue later. And people who stick their head in the sand. They are just avoiding the risks because they are not ready to deal with it. Or I'm sure you've all had the feeling of oh, this is going to be a big thing, so I have to deal with it later when I have time to focus on it, and I'm going to take this one piece and I'll deal with that later. Here's some early signs, practically speaking, instead of just theoretically. You'll see if you're early in the project that key details are missing from your plan. You'll see that roles and responsibilities are not clearly communicated. If it just says Heidi is the project manager and in charge of the project, but it doesn't say anything about, okay, Heidi has to work with this person. Here's the people who could be partners with the project, even if they're not officially on the team, then you're not completely defining roles and responsibilities. If there's no discussion of sustainability, not every project is going to require it, but for those that do, you need to be talking about how to maintain the final product so it doesn't just create and then disappear. And then contingency buffers, they need to be available and discussed. And by contingency, I mean, what happens if a piece of the project changes? What happens if this goes over budget? Is it becomes more flexible, and identifying the priority of the project in the longer scope of the organization's vision, it becomes easier to place that. Many of you have already said in previous office hours that you're in charge of projects or you're coming in the middle of a project. So you're not necessarily involved in those early stages. So what it might look to you if you're coming in the middle is suddenly somebody's saying that the project is different than what you were told. Either the timeline is shortened or lengthened, the budget is smaller or higher, or what you're supposed to be doing is completely different than you were informed before. You'll see that deadlines have been missed or that they don't align with what the project expectations initially were. And you'll see among the team and the stakeholders, you'll see a lot of confusion. You'll see low interest in the project, or you'll see low morale in general, depending on what stage you're coming in and why you're coming into the project. And then just to get even more practical, I wanted to share some quotes with you and show how they relate. I have heard probably every one of these quotes at some different time in working with things. We don't have time to plan. We just need to get started right now. I am sure you've all heard that one. Planning, I'm a planner. I love planning, and it does make things faster. It ignores foundational processes. It tries to dive in before you've got everybody on the same page, and it will slow you down in the long run. Taking a breath, making sure that you've got a plan together and that everyone's on the same page will propel the project forward much faster. I can't plan until I know the deadlines. I spend a lot of time saying how important the system is over just what the actual timeline is. And having the system ideas means that you can start, once you know your deadlines, you can start integrating everything together. It also stalls it. If somebody is constantly waiting to know when something is due, so let's say a presentation, if Shelly told me, I want you to do failure camp and I won't tell you when, then I would just put it off. But then if she said, oh, we're going to do it next week, then I have to run and rush to do the presentation because I was putting it off until I knew the deadlines. Just so you know, we did not plan it like this. Shelly is much more of a partner, and we plan the whole year and we try and adjust things as needed. But yeah, so we have more urgent priorities. Not only does that dismiss the project in favor of other tasks, it could be something you're seeing that's very reactive instead of proactive. That one is particularly difficult for a person like me because it just means that constantly the fires get put in front of you, which means that your project has to become a problem before it gets attention. And then trust us. Yes, there are times when trust us is appropriate. There's times when all of these are appropriate. But trust us is usually I can't tell you anything. I'm going to block the transparency. And it closes open lines of communication. Those of you who have been part of this, we had a whole session on communication before, and you can't really do a project without effective communication. The other half of probably the most important project management in tool is documentation. But yeah, so there's most of the quotes. Does anybody have other quotes that they frequently hear? I don't know if anyone wants to put it in the chat or come online and say something. I'll give, I'll hearing nothing, I'm going to go ahead and keep going, but feel free again to put it in the chat. So now what happens if your project is failing? In the work environment, you'll see that there's reputational damage to the organization, which can lead to higher turnover, which leads to stifled innovation, which leads to decreased engagement, which increases your vulnerability increases your vulnerability. Look, I can't talk, I'm failing during crises. And they do create a cycle. They impact each other, they keep moving forward, and they having a worse organization, having one that requires uh, less innovation and just keeps doing things the way that they're doing, it keeps making things kind of spiral downward. Um, and basically, I think the bigger thing I see is that it disengages staff. Um, the high turnover is already a huge operational cost, but having a good team to do projects is a huge need. And when you're dealing with things that could become low morale bits, uh, it creates a lot of an environment that is not pleasant to work in. And you'll also note that there are emotional aspects of failure. It's not just that somebody says, oh, well, the project failed. Um, there are those visceral emotions that can come out of you failing, or there's fear, shame, embarrassment. I'm sure all of you have felt that. I've felt it. And Shelly and I were just talking about the anxiety that can come with it because uh, it's not something anybody likes to do. No one sets out to fail um, that I think of. Um, it can decline self-esteem. It can also create, after anxiety and self-doubt, a future reliance on perfectionism, which is kind of contradictory. But the idea that, oh, I failed this, so I can't fail that, becomes more of a way that somebody doubles down and then puts too much effort into something and actually primes themselves for more failure. And if that second thing fails, it hurts even more than it would otherwise. Um, so when you're managing failure or when you're seeing someone else deal with failure, do keep in mind that this is not just a cultural thing. This is something you're dealing with where they may have very strong feelings about it. So I said I'm a fan of failure. I'm not a fan of people having those strong emotions. I'm not a fan of people working themselves to death, but I am a fan of turning failure into learning experiences. In the biggest theoretical sense, this is philosophical, but there is a failure paradox. Failure is a part of life. And how many of you have lived through an experience where failure helped you improve and made you stronger? The challenges that you faced built you into the person you are. Failure at work and failure in projects is the exact same. Eventually, you get better. Um, and it becomes long-term gain, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment. So try and know that it is a piece of a trajectory and take the good out of it as much as you can, because if you can see it from that perspective, it becomes less detrimental psychologically. And then I think most of you have probably seen the little pots with gold cracks in them. That's part of the Kintsugi philosophy, which shows that part of history can even be repaired and it makes it more beautiful when it's repaired from collapse or failure. And I always think that's a pretty example. But now we get into real theory. Um, Separating identity from failure is extremely important, especially if you're managing a team. It's failure is an experience, not an identity. And that's something I think everybody has to learn at some point. It's something some of us are still learning. Um, I'm still learning it, but it's important that people recognize and that teams recognize when they're in the middle of something that's even looking like a failure, that you discuss it about the project and not about the people. There are some really interesting examples of how to approach failure. within a culture that are not necessarily going to draw out that kind of in, individual mentality or identify things from a specific individual or blame. Um, the first is the five whys. I don't know if everybody's familiar with this one, but um, it's essentially trying to get to the root cause of why something happened. So the project failed. Let's say it was we didn't have information on time. Why? We didn't have information on time because this person or this system didn't work. Well, why didn't it work? Like, and you do that 5 times, and eventually you get to a cause. Um, it's a really tricky thing to do, but it's it helps you look systemically at the thing, and it helps you also find out something that might be impacting or bottlenecking some other process. Fail fast and fail forward. I've talked about this one a decent amount before. Fail fast is not about promoting failure. It is about learning to spot it early. It's about learning to figure out what to do. If you're going to fail the whole project and say it's not going to be done, it is a lot better to do that early than it is to spend years and years and years trying to get something off the ground. Um, I also like fail fast because it encourages the team to have engagement with it. It's not just about having some external person look at it. It engages the team in figuring out, hey, this is a sign that something might be wrong, and encourages coming to people to say, here's a red flag, here's a warning sign. That gives them more autonomy, that gives them more buy-in, that makes the whole project run even smoother because everyone's keeping an eye out for the final result. Talked about documentation and communication before. Things that you can do to actually start facilitating this culture in your organizations. Document your best practices. Have a running list of things that you learned, things that worked well. You can even have things that maybe didn't work well, and have that available so that when future projects are going, you can reference it and you can pick up with things that you've learned from similar projects or projects that use similar systems. Postmortems and retrospectives. Postmortems are usually at the end of a project, just the act of looking back and seeing what went well, what didn't, what could be improved. Those are interesting conversations. And retrospectives can happen in the middle of projects when you have a giant hurdle that you've just jumped over, or it took a little bit longer to get over than you thought. Sometimes pulling the team aside for a retrospective of that section is really helpful so that it can help you in the future of that project or others. And then recovery plans. If you are coming into a project that is failing and you need to identify ways to get it together, formally coming up with a plan to get it back on track can help you almost start the project over, and communicate with all of the correct people to make sure that the pieces start working again together. It's almost like trying to reset it. It's just that the pieces have already started being in play. As I said before, communicate. You want to openly acknowledge that the project is failing. Don't try and sugarcoat it. Don't try and hide it. We're going to correct this. We're going to make sure that here's what we're going to do to emphasize the project getting improved. Avoid blame of any individual. Even if everybody knows or assumes they know what's going on, talk about the project in terms of the project, not the person. That also improves the idea of separating identity from the project. And then work with the team to openly figure out and construct the new system. Make sure that you're as collaborative as possible. You don't want to be collaborative to the point of stalling the project again. You don't need to be a democratic process about everything. But you should be letting input happen from more than just 1 or 2 people. And then engage the stakeholders, not just your leadership, not just your team. The people who are impacted by or who can impact the project should have a say to make sure that your second push of the project goes even better than before. And then next, Sherry or Shelly, I don't know why I said Sherry, has a little game for us. You're muted.
And thank you for indulging me there. I actually knew I was muted, but that is an example of a failure. It's what can be called a small slip, and it's no big deal, right? I mean, we have all done it during Zoom calls, and we get over it. So we need to learn how to be um, flexible in failure. So this activity, I'm going to drop a link here and you'll be able to download a bingo card. And we're going to take a few minutes and see if anybody can get bingo with with this bingo card. Let me know if you have problems downloading it. It's available through Google Drive, and everyone should be able to get it.
I'm
I
gonna stop
can,
sharing my screen for
okay,
now.
and I can actually put the I can share mine with the bingo card. We'll give everybody a chance to get. I have too many windows open. Um, so this is just a fun activity. Some of the things that that can happen in projects. We have a couple of blanks where you can volunteer and put your own item in there to give you a chance to get bingo through putting something maybe personal there. You don't have to share. So let's see. I am losing all of the different windows, trying to keep. Heidi, if you wouldn't mind watching for people coming in the waiting room, that will help
Not a
me so
problem.
I can get rid of that screen.
Also, I'm finally getting a chance to see the chat, so I fully approve of t-shirts for failure camp. And then quotes that people had added, just make it happen, or minor stakeholders don't matter. Yeah, I've heard both of those. Just make it happen is really fun because that person usually has absolutely no idea what's going on.
There we go.
And then minor stakeholders don't matter is kind of in the same vein as trust me. Um, like almost like you don't understand that people can have a bigger impact than you think. Um,
Absolutely.
but yeah, go ahead.
So hopefully everybody's had a chance to get the document or they can see it on my screen. Oops, everybody's still seeing my screen? Nope, it disappeared probably, right? Are
I
you seeing
see
the
your
bingo card?
desktop with lots of
Yeah,
different
there
things.
we go. Okay, so I'm just blind on Zoom, so I'll just leave it like that. We'll give everybody a couple of minutes. If anybody wants to volunteer some of the items that they're going to put in the blank spots, and then we'd love to hear if anybody gets bingo. And or if you have questions or thoughts on any of these things, Heidi, you and I can talk through some of them. I know we've talked about scope creep in the past. Um, my life is just an opportunity for every failure to go wrong as I project manage our home renovations. So that is going on in my world.
I feel like I can have blackout on this.
Has anybody never had um, oh, well, I think this is one thing that we often do is forget to celebrate the successes of a project. So I'd
Yes.
love to know how many people on a regular basis celebrate the successes. One that probably all of us can fill in is that no one read the email. Um,
TLDR, right?
exactly. All right. Anybody have any thoughts or comments as other people fill in the bingo card? You're welcome to unmute. Whoops, I did it again. See a failure.
Okay, Brittany.
Forgot to hit save. How long has it been? Well, now with auto save, that's probably not something that happens very frequently anymore.
That initial save I can still forget. I have done
That's
that.
true. Or think about it in a different light. Forgot to hit save, forgot to document something that happened during the project. So whether it's, actual digital saving, with your computer, or just forgetting to put it into the plan at all, that could certainly fit into that box as well. Tech failures during meetings. Oh, no one has those kind of
Do not
issues.
trust autosave. Okay, Chris.
Awesome. So how are people going? Do we need a few more minutes? Any volunteers on some of the items that you're putting in on your own?
1 minute, please. I
Absolutely.
want to get the Jeopardy theme song up.
Well, we might not do that for liability reasons, but
Oh, yeah. I forgot we
but
posted these.
but we do have our own custom song that I bought for Ellis and Tap that is on our introduction to our podcast. Um, so we could get that and maybe have AI jazz it up. All right. I am going to stop sharing my screen unless we hear that it's needed. Is anybody able to get bingo? Anybody need me to put it back up? I'm happy to do so.
So I didn't get bingo, but I've got some checks on the page.
Yay.
And you know what? Even if we didn't get bingo, that's actually good, right? That means you've had fewer failures. Um, I think I'm with Heidi that I could probably black out all of them. At some point in my life, in my career, they've all been there. Um, and Heidi, do you want to talk about, should we talk a little bit about what prompted us to have this session, or do we want to wait till later on in the session?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I have left are the key takeaways, and I can just have those up because they're summarizing everything that we've just done. So let me pull this and just have it in the background. But one of the reasons that we really wanted to bring this up, and I think this will be a highly viewed video after the session anyway, is because I think I've seen a lot of times people pull away from failure. And I have never personally understood that. Um, I have always taken it probably to a negative amount of the next extreme of, okay, I failed, so I have to learn and do better. I am definitely in the camp of failure made me try and be a perfectionist, and then that loop created a problem. Um, but the idea, I've even seen it with grant applications where, oh, well, we really struggled with this grant last time, so we don't want to deal with it again next time. Um, and I think that you can always learn from it. There's failure to some extent only exists if you acknowledge it as a total failure. Um, and I think people appreciate more being told, hey, this isn't working. How do we make it better? Than just being told you didn't do it right. Um, so knowing that I have interacted with people who have a completely different frame of mind on that, I really wanted to. And then Shelley, you, I think in our conversations, you were thinking the exact same way about everything.
I think so. And what really prompted me to embrace this session is because while I was in law school, I went to Vanderbilt Law, and Cat Moon hosted Failure Camp. That was the name of this one-day session that they had down at Vanderbilt. And I had no idea why I was going, what it was for. I just knew that Cat Moon was awesome, and I wanted to go and see more about what she was doing down at Vanderbilt. And I arrived at this event, and my husband went with me as well. He had he was still in recovery from a massive stroke, and he was dealing with a lot of issues as a result of the stroke, of not being able to do things that he had done before. So anyway, that is where we were. I was in law school. He was recovering from stroke. We went to this event, and people got up and happily told their stories about failures in their lives. And it just struck me as shocking that somebody would admit out loud that they made a mistake, or that they failed at something, or it just was completely opposite of the way that I lived my life. I was not willing to admit to mistakes. Even though I had plenty of, I didn't want anybody else to see that I was human. So it just was a very impactful session. And of course they went on to say, to show how even though they had these massive failures, they went on with their life and were very successful, later in life. But just hearing that story, and it was very impactful for my husband as well, who is also a bit of a perfectionist. And hearing these people who have taken something that could have been very harmful to their careers and turning it around and making it productive, just helped him to um, accept his new reality with stroke brain. So it just was a very it probably was more impactful for him, um, because of the realization that it's okay to admit you're not perfect. And that's something that I've struggled with as well. So when Heidi and I started discussing this, and thinking about project management, where it is so common for failures, or things that we call failures that really are more like the small slip that we did a few minutes ago, with not unmuting before speaking on Zoom. We need to reframe what many of us think of as failures, and think of them more as learning lessons, or little steps along the way. We need to be more forgiving of ourselves. So that's what I hope that people gain from this, that it's okay to have these failures, because no one is perfect, and no one is going to go through their life without having setbacks. So I hope that that's what will be one of the takeaways as well. So go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that's the presentation I had, and I was hoping that we would have some questions or conversation around failure, because this has been a popular topic. And if anyone wants to add anything to it about the presentation from their experience, we'd absolutely love to hear it.
And if people prefer, we can always pause the recording, and so people feel more. Actually, let's just go ahead and do